I'm calling this a thoughts video as opposed to a review because I haven't beaten the game. But I played about 5 to 6 hours, and I think that's enough time to review the basics, how the game's structured, how the environments work, the gameplay, the pacing. I think you could draw a conclusion of all of that from the first 5 to 6 hours, because that's what they deliberately put at the beginning of the game that the player's first exposed to give you an idea of what the rest of the game is. And I'm sure that people will say, as with most JRPGs, well, you have to play 20 hours before you decide if you like it or not. But I just think that's unreasonable. Now, as with my Nier Automata review, people will say that this is just me being contrarian and trying to get clickbait, but these are my honest views. I'm reviewing this because people care about SMT and people care about Nocturne. I'm not reviewing some like random game that I hated that no one cares about. So I guess there is that aspect to it, but no, these are my genuine thoughts. So before we get into Nocturne, just a little bit about my relationship with the SMT franchise. So by and large, I really do like it, at least the idea of it. I like having all these mythological creatures. I like how it's kind of like a Pokemon game. I like how they're very much based on metaphysics and abstract ideals and ideology, and how it's very much kind of this existentialist thing where ideologies and prospects of reality become real. I like how they have a whole bunch of different endings. Generally speaking, none of them are necessarily a good ending or a bad ending. They're just kind of different based on the attitude of the person playing it. Many of them, like the Persona games or the Devil Survivor games, have some of the best character writing I've ever seen. And if nothing else, they all leave a pretty big impression. So I do love Persona 3, 4, 5, and Strikers are all really solid, good games. Some of my favorite games of all time. Devil Survivor 1 and 2 are two of my favorite games of all time. Particularly Devil Survivor 2 was on my list of my top 10 favorite games of all time. Strange Journey, I kind of have similar feelings about to this game, although I like Strange Journey more than this game. And SMT4 was okay. It was very much a mixed bag. It was once again kind of like this game, but they ironed out some of the flaws of this game a bit more. But people say this is the best SMT game. I've seen a lot, pretty much a consensus on that. This is the best main series game. This is the best, like, non-Persona game in the series. So when I saw that it was coming out on Switch, I was really excited. I had tried playing this game on PS2 emulator years ago, but I just kind of bored quit it, and I don't really remember anything about the game. And when I started playing it this time, I immediately realized why. But to me, the big attraction was that they added in an easy mode. While I have played many of the SMT games on normal difficulty, I find in a lot of them, easy mode is normal for any other RPG, and then normal is hard for any other RPG. So, like Persona, easy mode is a little too easy, but it's not like horrendously so. And then with something like Devil Survivor, I'd say normal mode is in between normal and hard for another game. And Strange Journey, I think, was kind of similar, where normal's between normal and hard for another game. But then you get into games like Persona 5 Strikers, where easy mode is a complete and total joke, where you one-shot enemies, and then normal mode is pretty damn hard. And that's also an issue I have with this one. But yeah, so SM3 Nocturne, they announced a remaster of it with an easy mode. So I was like, let's go, let's play this bastard. So I fire the game up and I start playing it, and about half an hour in, I realized why I dropped it the first time. This game has some of the worst level design I think I've ever seen. And I guess people will say, well, Argent, it's on purpose that they made endless corridors that look exactly the same with a mediocre mini-map and no arrows telling you where to go or no journal thing. And I get that it's a PS2 game, but there's lots of games from this era that don't have this god-awful level design. Like, honestly, the Shinjuku Medical Center is an endless stream of rooms that look exactly the same, corridors that look exactly the same. It's just a maze. And I don't think it adds anything to the game. I don't think it makes it more interesting or more atmospheric. It's just really boring and it's just padding. And I find like every level of this game like that. Any of the underground areas are just endless corridors of the same thing, a bunch of pointless rooms that don't serve any purpose, with someone who offers terrible dialogue. There's the part, and I think it's Ginza or whatever it's called, where there's all the ladders and you have to like cross the sewer, and it's just really confusing and complicated. And I think it adds nothing. And it just leads to me like running around. And so people will say, well, Argent, you just have to use a guide. I don't think you should have to use a guide to just make your way across a very basic area. To me, that's a sign of bad game design. And this was an issue I had in SMT4, and it's better for this, but I just couldn't figure out how I was supposed to get to places. And I often would have to use a guide, and it would be something like, oh, leave the level, go to the overworld, then go behind the place on the overworld, or go click something on the overworld. And it's just, they don't really tell you that. And I get people like, well, it's a mystery game, you're supposed to uncover it. I just don't like that, though. I want to play the fucking game. I don't want to deal with this nonsense of just wandering around. Like, whenever I'm playing one of these, I just find I often have to turn to a guide just to know where I'm even supposed to go and what I'm supposed to do. Because this game doesn't have any kind of journal or quest system. And once again, I get it's a PS2 game, but it's just, you can very easily forget what you're even supposed to do. And there is fast travel, so I'll give it a lot of credit for that. But the fast travel spots are kind of far between, and to get to them, you have to get through the god awful level design. So that was why I quit this the first time. Is like I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do. I was tired of using a guide for how to get across like basic areas, and I just wasn't having any fun. And that's an immediate issue I had with this game the second time. It's just as bad as I remember it. It's worse than like even Strange Journey, because at least Strange Journey, you just start off in the dungeon. The dungeons can be kind of a mess and are overly long and drawn out, but at least you know you're in a dungeon. At least you don't get lost in like the ship's interior or something. Kind of the same thing for Digital Devil Summoner. So already, like the basics of playing this game are drawn out, excessively long, don't add anything to it. I guess it adds something in the perspective that the whole game is like post-apocalyptic, so everything's supposed to be empty and run down. But you need to have some balance there. The majority of the game shouldn't be you just wandering around, wondering where the fuck you're supposed to go. I just don't think that's good game design, but people can disagree with me. So that's issue number one, and that's a pretty big issue. Issue number two is the difficulty. So let's talk about the difficulty. Merciful difficulty is a joke. It's like an insult. I get that it's stupid to complain about the easy difficulty, and I'm sure people will ridicule me for that. But I think there needs to be some balance. I tried playing it on normal briefly, and like the first random encounter I came up against almost wiped my party. And people are always like, well, fuse your demons, upgrade your demons, that kind of thing. Well, you can do that, but the map is so shit, and the fusion spots are so in between, and the load times suck. So you have to like try to figure out how to get back to the fast travel, then fast travel back to a place where there's the Temple of Shadows, and then the fusion animation's really long, and it's just padding. It's just unnecessary nonsense that makes me just not want to play the game. And I don't want to spend like 5 minutes being strategic in random counters that happen every 5 seconds as you're walking around this area having no idea where to go. I just don't think that's fun. I don't think that's good game design. And they lie about what merciful difficulty is. So supposedly you're supposed to deal twice as much damage and take half as much. That's not true. because you one-shot basic enemies on Merciful, and on normal it takes about 6 hits. So it really ups your attack by like 4 times, and it decreases damage to you by like 80 to 90%, and you dodge like 90% of attacks. So there's no balance here. Like I just want a normal-ish difficulty. Like I don't get I just feel like the SMT games are like, fuck you, if you don't want to be hardcore, we're just gonna give you this joke of a game that has no challenge or anything. Like once again, I don't the normal mode's too hard for me. The easy mode's a joke. This is one of my issues with Strikers, is I don't really mind if I die against bosses, but I don't want the random encounters that fire every 5 seconds to take like 10 minutes and to possibly wipe my party out. I don't like that. Also, on Merciful difficulty, they dramatically lower the number of random encounters you get, and they up the amount of XP you get. So it dramatically cuts down on the amount of time you waste just wandering around this mess. And it's like, I don't want to say that this game sucks or that it's bad, because there is a lot of things I like about it. Like the premise of the game I think is really interesting. I think the different philosophical systems are really interesting. The graphics look really, really good for a PS2 game. It has kind of a really interesting and unique art style that I don't know if I've really seen anywhere else. And there is a lot of like good things about it. But I just don't think the basics are there. I just don't think the basic gameplay is functional less good. And it's a fan base that I kind of find very frustrating. It's kind of like the Dark Souls fan base, where they won't accept any criticism of their precious S&T franchise. Like, I know I've seen lots of threads on Dark Souls where they'll be like, there's no bugs in this game. The hitboxes are amazing. And like, these are the same people who will do the bug runs of Dark Souls 2 that take like 20 minutes in like a 30-hour game, because they like exploit bugs to like go through doors and to like fly and stuff like that. And they won't allow any criticism of it. And I kind of find SMT fans are like that as well. And I get that it's a niche franchise, and I get that it's supposed to be super hard. But at the same time, isn't the goal of a video game to sell the video game? Like, Dark Souls was a niche franchise, but it became more mainstreamy because, A, there's not nearly as much grinding, the levels are not nearly as long, the save points are much more numerous and much closer. The gameplay is a lot more fun and dynamic. There's a lot more kind of different ways you can go about stuff. And I do think the Souls games are more fair than this. If for no other reason than the death penalty really isn't anything to worry about. Um, it's not that big a deal. And once again, it's maybe like 2 minutes to get back to where your corpse was. Dying against the bosses, once again, you can try again pretty easily. I think the Souls games are very fair, even if they are very difficult. And I think they put enough like ability to power yourself up, or try to cheese the game, or use a summon to get through it, even if it is very challenging. But I just feel that's not the case here. And it's like, if that series could be more mainstreamy and they sold more copies, don't they want to sell copies on this? Like, even just putting in a normal difficulty mode would make this a lot better. Adding in some sort of, like, this is where you're supposed to go, you moron. You can even have it, like, turn offable if you like going through it, but they won't do that. I guess maybe in some of the later games they got better about it, but when the threads are basically, oh, this is how you exploit it so you're able to play the basics of the game, that's not a good sign. And when people like, oh, just use a guide for the whole game, once again, that's not a good sign. You can play the Souls games without using a guide. The main complaint I have there is just that a lot of the stuff, when it comes to hidden items, And even just basic items, it's not very clear or intuitive, and you can very easily miss them. Like I remember in DS1, if you didn't know to go to the graveyard, you won't get the Zweihander, which is one of the best swords in the game for strength builds. And then like you could very easily miss like Great Tree Hollow and Ashen Lake, which have some of the most important items in the game, like the Chloranthy ring. But yeah, overall, I get why people like this game. I get why it's a classic and why people think it's interesting. I just think it hasn't aged well at all. And it has severe flaws to it that don't make it enjoyable. And if people like it, it's not something I think is complete garbage to nearly the same extent I think something like Nier is. But I just think it's not very good. It's not very playable. And it's really long in the tooth. And if they were going to do a remaster, I kind of wish they'd put a bit more effort into it than what they wound up doing. I mean, they fixed the graphics up. The graphics look great, but everything else is just kind of meh. So, those are my thoughts on it. I hope you enjoyed my review. God bless, and I'll talk to everybody again real soon.